I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation, but Andrew Kuo... do I have to keep saying this? Andrew Kuo doesn't take days off. How are you, buddy?
Feel phenomenal. It was an amazing weekend of protests in New York. My feet are tired. I feel awesome. How you feeling now?
I'm feeling pretty good. I did a little protesting. I don't think I protested too much. Sorry, that was terrible. Yeah, I did a little marches, some vigils. Mm-hmm. That's what we do now.
That's what we do.
You adjust your schedule around the protest.
I was very impressed by how timely everything was. If you follow certain Instagram accounts, you know where people will be at every spot. And if you're 15, 20 minutes late, they may have moved on.
Fortunately, there's another one to go to.
Always. And they're all over New York. It's a whole thing. And after being cooped up for 3 months with Netflix, this is like a very change in our days, right?
Well, it's nice to have the curfew gone. I don't think it's really gonna lead to rampant socializing, but it's nice to not assume that you'll be harassed by the New York pricks and dicks for being out after 8.
That was like sussed out so quickly that it just didn't even have a chance to be nefarious. Everyone's like, oh, we know why you're doing this. And they're like, right.
Well, yeah, phase 1, baby. We're back.
New York is open again. MSG is open. The Knicks are practicing in there already, or maybe not. I can't tell.
I don't know exactly what phase 1 means other than like manufacturing, I think.
Yeah, can you open up, like workplaces can't be open, right? Like
I'm not sure how that works. I think phase 2 was open for upstate New York, and then you can have like outdoor seating at restaurants. I heard some spots in Soho were doing that yesterday, and cops came rushing in. But New York is basically phase 2.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there, but still, it's like breathtaking to see, if you're paying attention, how many places have been closed for so long, right? Like, there's people on the streets a little bit. It's been a beautiful weather week, and the protests drive people out in droves, but still, like, not much open.
It's kind of incredible how our attention span shifted for obvious and reasonable reasons towards, away from COVID, which of course still exists, to the point where I don't even really know what the numbers are anymore. It was like checking the box score.
Yeah.
COVID box score every day. Like, oh, how are we doing? How many intubations? How many hospitalizations? How many fatalities? Now you're just sort of like, oh, I haven't really been paying attention. I don't know. Are we spiking? Are we dropping? Is it gone? Is it flooding back? I don't follow the COVID anymore.
And there's a lot of hot takers with reverse engineering being like, well, COVID was not a big deal because we're not thinking about COVID. And I'm like, well, COVID's still a big deal, but you do have a point, right? Like, if you turn on your TV and it's one thing the whole time, you're going to think about that one thing. And maybe that's the whole premise of this BLM movement. It's like, we need to talk about this because we've just been avoiding it for centuries. And COVID is still out there and it's still real, but it's just not getting coverage.
Well, also, I don't think that people are unable to do 2 things at once. I think that is in our capacity as humans.
Yeah.
But 2 things that are this big and cause this much concern and need this much attention, that's tougher. And I will say, everyone, for the most part, at protests, everyone I've seen, excluding the cops, everyone is wearing masks.
Yeah. Smart.
When you're outside and walking around, everyone's got a mask on.
Yeah. And to COVID doubters' credit here, the numbers have been going down. Like, there's a few days last week that New York had no deaths, so we're trending down, but the rest of the country has a different situation. Every city has a different thing. I'm praying that like we're outside and it's warm and there hasn't been a lot of transmission during these protests, but we'll see in a few weeks. I think like we found out it's hard to get outside.
That seems to be the case, and that's a reason for some optimism for the next couple months at least. Like,
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
it's gonna be grim as shit when it's October and like we don't have a vaccine, you say, and now we're forced back indoors.
oh, it's gonna be rough and like, a broken clock is right, but like it subsiding in the heat could be the case. Like we're learning all this stuff kind of on the fly together. But yeah, October is gonna roll around, and have we invested enough self-care in ourselves to resume kind of a isolated existence?
Well, I don't know about you. I'm mostly working on a vaccine. I've been tinkering around with some test tubes in the kitchen. I think I'm close. So
What you got?
hopefully
What you got? Some bleach? Some Listerine?
some baking powder and some vinegar and some food coloring.
I went to the post office to deliver some mail the other day, and the post office person was like, out of nowhere, unprompted, don't take any vaccine that the government makes. I'm like, huh. And she was Jamaican British. She was a citizen of England, but what her heritage was from Jamaica, and she was like, don't take anything. If anyone makes anything that goes into your body, say no. And I'm like, whoa, for someone who works for the U.S. government, I thought that was interesting. She was great. She
I
talked.
saw
she
Ice
talked
Cube put up
some
some
sense.
photo that had like a QAnon image on it. And I'm just like, no, Cube. I've really enjoyed Ice Cube's return on social media. I just hope he saw the image and was not advocating becoming a QAnon zealot. That would be worse than any of the movies he's ever made.
Yo, how come there's no new Ice rappers? We have Lil has been a thing for a longer time than Ice has been a thing. What happened to Ice? Is it the end of crack?
I think it's mostly global warming.
I like that. But the
I
Ices
have
are,
no better line than that one. That was all I got.
the Ices are having a moment though. Like Cube and T are doing things.
Yeah, I mean, Ice-T is a Twitter legend. Cube is still finding his sea legs, so to speak. Without further small talk, we have a great guest today. Poet, best-selling author, thinker, community activist. Hanif Abdurraqib is here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, y'all. I really appreciate it.
Hanif.
So you're in Columbus, Ohio, and I do have some questions about Columbus overall. But what is the vibe right there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we had a really sustained, 10 days of protest here. People out every day, different groups out every day. I'm sure, I haven't been out today, but I'm sure there are people at the State House today. It has been largely thoughtful, largely taking on many modes, marches happening in the suburbs, marches coming through the suburbs, and into downtown. And on top of that, I think a thing here that has felt good for me to see is that we're experiencing a moment of a movement that is almost leaderless, a community-led movement, right? Where people's needs are being met on the ground. I think when you have community-led movements, the question at the forefront of those movements is always, what do people need? And so it's easy, instead of what can I take from this person or what can I gain from being aligned with this person? It's often, what do people need and how can we fulfill that need? And so it's really easy for people to kind of get in where they fit in, because when the question at the forefront is always, what do people need? That's a question that has multiple answers and someone who's willing to fulfill them, hopefully. And so that's been good. Last night there was a rally to get the police out of schools here that I was really present at. I'm a K through 12 Columbus City Schools graduate, and there are police in schools from K through 12 for me, and I saw that. I saw the impacts of that. I saw the anxiety that pushed on folks, and the fact that it's still present is frustrating for me. But I have hope. What's wild is so much of what's happening now not just here, but I think everywhere, is just the reframing of the American imagination. You know what I mean? Like last night I had a moment where I was like, yo, I think police are really going to be up out of the schools here. But that's something I never thought was possible. You know, I mean, forget when I was a teenager. You know, when I was a teenager, I was just like, I don't like the police. I knew I didn't like the police, but I thought they were just a part of the American fabric that I could never distance myself from or live without. And last night, you know, like even my imagination as someone who's kind of been doing many types of different types of justice work for a while, my imagination is being reshaped. And I was like, yo, like I think we're at a point where like cops might not be in the schools here.
That is one of those things that when you start thinking about it, you start wondering how we got here. Like, wait. To your point, there's cops in schools? Why did we do that again? And it feels like we keep hitting these sort of challenges along this entire discussion where it was like, wait, why are things the way they are? Why did we end up in this place that doesn't seem to make sense? And can we just change it immediately now?
Yeah. And I think that, like, you know, what really gets me hype about the rallies and the movement and the organizing around the getting cops out of schools here is it's student-led. You know, last night, the folks at the microphone were high school seniors or rising juniors, like young folks in that. You know, not to make a sports analogy out the gate, but you know, you talk about like in the recruiting where folks stay in house. I mean, Ohio State doesn't have this problem with football because, you know, like if you come up loving football in Ohio, you're probably going to go to Ohio State. But so many of our brilliant young folks here leave. You know, they go to college elsewhere, or they kind of just, you know, they're not present after high school. And I love seeing young activists come in and lead movements that hopefully sustain and reverberate through their entire peer group. You know, they're like high school freshmen out yesterday. And those are the folks who I'm most eager to follow and kind of be at their disposal, you know, because I'm excited to see what they do and how I can help.
Yeah, a lot of your writing is about the place where you grew up, Columbus, and about staying there and about your home. And do you encourage kids to stay, or like what is your vision for the city?
I mean, it's, you know, I hope people stay, but it's also easy for me to say that, you know. Mm-hmm. I'm in somewhat of a position of privilege. You know, I grew up here. I stayed here largely, barely left. You know, I left for like 2 years to live in Connecticut, and then moved back. But I also don't have any, you know, I didn't come up in the way that I didn't have the opportunities that a lot of brilliant young folks here have now, you know, despite the fact that I think the school system here is proud of my accomplishments. When I was in school here, I was like not great at school. You know, I didn't have colleges from all over asking me to come. Yeah, I was in trouble all the time here. And so in a lot of ways, my staying here was just a product of the opportunities I had. I didn't have that many opportunities to leave. And so it's easy for me to say that folks should stay in the city, but I ultimately want people to pursue whatever opportunities their brilliance has afforded them. And, you know, you can always come home if that's in the cards for you. But I say all that, and I also know that a big desire of mine is to see the coalitions that are being built here flourish. You know, there are so many brilliant organizing groups doing work on the ground and beyond, and I know that in order for those groups to flourish, folks do have to stay, folks do have to be engaged, and so, I mean, you know, ultimately, yeah, I want to see people born and raised in the city staying here to fight for the city, but I also know it's easier for me to say that now in my 30s with, you know, established roots here.
I've only been to Columbus once, and it was in 2004 when we were doing voter registration for the memorable candidate John Kerry.
Good job on that.
And, yeah, thanks for your work there.
Yeah, couldn't have done it without you, man.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't have been knocking on college doors in summer. That was a bad
that's why
strategy from the jump.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think a lot of people don't live here. There's two different there's two different Columbuses, right? There's the Columbus that exists from like late August until like April, May, and then there's the Columbus that exists in the summer. My favorite. I mean, it's my favorite, and this is no diss to the Ohio State students, but I mean that's my favorite mode of the city, which we won't be getting a lot of this year. It's really like punctuated by festivals, and by, it premises itself on people being able to be outside and being able to engage in the city with a freedom that isn't there when there are like tens of thousands of students being funneled into the population, kind of like smacked into the middle of the city, and so Columbus in the summer is you can park places. You could like, and I do appreciate. I don't really. So I gave up on football a few years ago. So I don't. Although I say that, and to
European
live in
football,
Columbus,
right? European football.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but to live in Columbus, Ohio State football is almost inescapable, and so like despite myself, I still kind of fall for the romantics of a game day Saturday. There's something really special about a Saturday Ohio State football game day in Columbus, and even if what's special is just that you can run your errands. Like if there's a noon game, if there's a kickoff at noon, that's like starting at 11:30, you could run your errands. But I still love the way the city buzzes around Ohio State football, even though I'm like not that invested in Ohio State football itself.
That's a really good tourist slogan that we've just engineered. Like Columbus in summer, you can park. It's like really nails it. But what I thought was interesting was it reminded me so much architecturally, the landscape, the buildings. I guess that's also architecturally, but it was just like Rochester, New York. It was so similar. We don't have a large campus like that, but reminded me so much of it. And it was something that I was thinking, and you had just mentioned that so many people I knew, regardless of demographic, everyone left. Everyone left. And growing up, we always had this idea of like, in a very sort of hip hop sense too, like we're going to make Rochester a thing. We're going to have like a store and we're going to have a clothing line and we're going to rent this place and we'll end up having a club or a bar. And it was just this idea of like making your city, I guess, like notable. And then everyone left. Right. Is there hope for the small city in America? Maybe even because of COVID, I'm not sure. But are things changing for like the small city?
I don't know. One, I think it depends on how you define small city. What's wild is like Columbus never felt like a small city to me, even though I'm sure it is by comparison. But I think I don't know. I guess it is because I was about to say I don't even know if it's a small Midwest city, but I think it is probably small when compared to a Chicago or a St. Louis, maybe even a Detroit. Although I do feel like Detroit is somewhat like our sister city in a way. But I mean, I think the hope is existed for me for as long as I've been alive here, and because I think that my hope for the city is in the people, and not necessarily in the infrastructure. Because I grew up in a really poor area that has been ravaged by gentrification, and so I know that infrastructure is fleeting, and I know that people who are at the margins of a city are often treated as expendable. And so my hope is always in the people and how to serve the people of the city. So I think there's great hope for the people of Columbus. And I will say that like I've just been, you're kind of like getting me on a high, right? Like after this last week, this last 10 days, seeing the way the city really mobilized to just get people on a baseline level, to get people what they need. That's just caught me in a really hopeful place.
Yeah, I met you a few years ago. We had done, I believe, something for Spotify at an artist-run gallery where you talked and I had done paintings on the walls. And then afterwards, I think you had gone home to work, I believe, and the artist who owned that gallery showed us like this commune that he was a part of, a building in back of the gallery.
Oh yeah, Milo Grogan, yeah.
Yeah, and it was really cool. It almost reminded me of like Williamsburg in 1999. And he was like, we're doing stuff. This is an active community and we have an infrastructure where we can invite artists to stay here and make work here. And that was a few years ago. What's the vibe now?
It's the same, I think. I mean, I think that now so much of that work is being done to combat gentrification. Um, but I do think, I mean, the artists in the city, maybe I'm speaking for myself here, because the thing that I've been getting asked a lot, particularly in the past like 2 weeks, is about um, art and activism, where it's like, well, do you feel like your writing is leading a movement or whatever. And I don't want to dismiss people asking those questions, but I think for me and for a lot of artists in the city, like my work as an artist feels entirely, um, maybe not entirely separate, but feels a bit separate from my work um, in the streets as someone who cares about the city. Now I feel like those two things reflect each other because they almost have to. Like the concerns I bring to my writing are the same concerns I bring to um, police abolition and housing justice and all the things that I'm interested in. But I don't think, I don't feel like my art is central um, when I am marching with folks or when I am getting supplies for, like, my art is not central to that. And I feel like a lot of artists in the city are able to operate between those two modes. Like I got homies who are photographers who don't have their cameras out, who are like leading marches, you know what I mean? And who are not capturing the march, but are out there organizing and leading and keeping people safe. I got homies who are painters who, yes, are painting murals on the boarded up windows, but who are also like running supplies to people in protest. And so, I think for all of us who create here and who care deeply about the city, we know we're operating in many modes because, sometimes what the people need is absolutely not my writing. You know what I mean? And undoubtedly, like, people have and I do want to be clear and say, like, undoubtedly people have used things I've written to great benefit, and I'm appreciative, undoubtedly. But I think there are times where what people need is for me to show up as a person and not as a person who writes.
I feel that so much because in New York, when you go out there, it's like if you ask anybody what they do, they have such a rich story. But like the human condition, sometimes when you're confronted with it, is so like leveling. And I agree, like not for another sports analogy, like I just want to run bottles of water. I want to like gather towels. Like
Yeah.
I want to do anything because there's not enough time to talk about everything, the complete package of a human, right? And then when you're all together, it's just like you start functioning as a unit and as a team, and as like someone needs to like wipe down the floor when someone falls, and I would love to do that.
What's kind of amazing in New York is that and elsewhere, but because things are closed down, the only social activity we really have is going out to protest. So everyone sort of does it on a daily basis or every other day. And there's a sustainability to it. And whether that endures or not, I don't know. But that is very different from prior moments of activism, such as, the Iraq War. And, it's like, to put it in like a totally like cliche way, it's like, well, protesting is like the new party. And I don't think that is the case specifically. But every day you look at the schedule. And in New York, there are like 6 in Brooklyn every day. There are 6 in Manhattan. They're in the Bronx. They're in
they go
they're in
fast.
Queens.
If you're late, you miss it.
Yeah, and it's like you're like, oh, 4:00. Okay, I can meet you guys over there. We'll do we'll do Washington Square Park, or I'll see you at McCarran at 7. It's a vigil, but whatever. We can march afterwards.
Right.
Like, I've never seen anything like this. And that it's a sustainability, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it has sustained in a very real way. I mean, I found myself becoming a bit of a protest soccer parent through this, where it's like, which isn't, and it's almost inadvertent, like not even back in the day. I mean, I'm thinking about like 2015 when I was out, or 2016. I just wasn't thinking about like water or proper shoes to wear, that kind of stuff. But I think because I've seen so much of this sustained for a long time, my instincts are like, yo, please drink water, like, please, whatever the temperature is, dress like it's 10 degrees warmer, that kind of thing.
Especially with COVID, right?
Yeah. I think that's been a part of it, because I think some of it is just like a reminder to myself, because I'm someone for whom, like adrenaline, if you're getting active, like very active, like the early days of this here, at least, being very active in terms of like, what was going down in the streets, that just like masks, for me, it masks hunger and fatigue and thirst. And so I feel really like nourished, but it's just the adrenaline. And then I would get home and be like, oh wait, no, I'm, one, dehydrated, two, very hungry, three, I can barely stand up. You know what I mean? And so I will say that I my hope is that people are taking care of themselves as this carries on and goes really deep.
So like last night there was a protest that we just ran across. My friend and I were at McCarran Park for a little vigil. We were kind of hanging out, and then a protest just sort of materialized coming down Bedford through Williamsburg, and we just joined in it. And it was definitely run by teenagers, no question. No question. They had megaphones. We saw them racing through the park to coordinate where it was going to go, and someone collapsed in the middle of the park. And we saw 19-year-olds in real time trying to learn how to deal with this, how to try to move people back and try to call someone to help without compromising what they were doing. And we saw medics running over, and like, this is how you're generating like the next generation of leaders, and they're doing it on the fly and learning as they go.
Yeah, I mean that's been encouraging as well, because I think that was the way it was for me and for so many of my peers. We kind of were young and got in the fight, whatever the fight looked like. But the difference now, I think, is that when I was young and getting in the fight, no matter what the fight looked like, it felt like I had to answer to someone. It felt like there was a single leader at the head of a thing that I had to respond to or answer to. And now, I mean, I feel like at least here, the community is you have to be accountable to the community, but people are asking, people are throwing questions into the universe and into the community, and the community is responding with answers. And I feel like that has been really heartening to see, because replicating outdated models of leadership does not really liberate anyone, I don't think. And it's not really conducive, I think, to progress. And so really what I'm excited about is just seeing a community come around each other and just hold each other up. Like, really, like, I was out marshaling one of the marches this weekend, and straight up someone just like saw someone I don't know, just saw me and was like, you look thirsty, like, you look like you need some water. I got cold water in my bag. And just hit me off with like it was the last water they had in their bag, and they just hit me off with it. You know what I mean? And they did that because they knew that around some other corner somewhere else, someone would be waiting with the water for them, and that has been really encouraging. And I'm someone, people who know my work and know me, I'm cynical, like, I'm a very cynical person, and I'm often fighting against that cynicism, and often fighting against nihilism. But so it takes a lot for me to get this excited and get this kind of fuzzy about community action. But what I've seen in the last 10 days feels sustainable. It feels like even when people come off the streets, there are ways that can be built. There are ways to build towards a sustainable community that cares for each other.
I mean, I hunger for leadership constantly in my life in micro ways. Like, if I go out to dinner, I want someone to kind of lead that. Like, I know where I want to go. I know what we should order. I know what to do. And I look at that for my government, for my basketball teams, for my local politicians. And sometimes it's such a basic human idea for me that it's like, do we even have to talk about leadership as leadership? Because someone should just like express their thoughts, and we should like agree or disagree to follow them. And in this movement, I feel like I am looking for a voice, maybe because I'm lazy, but I'm like, can Steven Jackson be the guy? Like, I want Jax to be the one, because he has done great, I think, so far. But you're right, like, this thing maybe takes a different form than things we've seen before. Am I wrong?
No, and don't get me wrong. There are definitely parts of my life where I would like some leadership. I would love it if my favorite NBA team had a stronger leadership person.
Cat is good though, right?
Yeah, I do love Cat, but I don't. Well,
we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. And trust me, I definitely definitely need a leader when it comes to selecting where to eat. Like just these little. I mean, I need. I'm too indecisive when it comes to the like micro level things in my life. But I think that on a larger scale level, a part of for me, like a part of having an abolitionist politic means that we're not just we're abolishing control too, like abolishing a relationship with control. That demands the comfort of leadership and hopefully moving towards something better. But that said, I mean, don't get me wrong, when it comes time to like, pick the curtains for my dining room, like I need someone. Oh my God, yeah. You know what I mean?
Someone help me. Yeah.
Someone help me, like
Captain. Yeah.
But hopefully, I mean,
I was gonna say, like, hopefully the community, like,
should I have?
Yeah, someone in the community can help me. Undoubtedly, there's an interior designer in the community here in Columbus who I can lean on.
Yeah.
So speaking of the abolitionist idea, that phrase has become something that went from, if we're looking at those Google charts that no one was talking about or few people were talking about, and now you see it everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And there's this dialogue going on between the side that says, well, that just means a reboot of the system, or it means a let's tinker with it. And then the other side says, no, abolition means abolition. What do you think of this debate that's happening? I guess that's over sort of the rhetorical, I guess the word abolition itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'll just say a small thing. I think it is peak American, like we get caught up in semantics as a way to deflect from a larger conversation. But I've also just been big on, because one thing that I've been fighting to come to terms with myself too is that I want to start understanding that there are people who have done this work already and define these things already. I stay on the critical resistance workshops have been helpful for me, and Miriam K. About like there are a lot of activists who have built the language that I'm looking for. A lot of Black activists, a lot of Black women activists who have built my understanding of what abolition can be. And so there's so many resources, right, that I can just be like here, and here. And like, because I'm not personally like, another thing is I'm starting to think about what I do and don't have energy for, right? And so like I don't have energy to like tussle over semantics of language when there's just like a deep well of resources that I can just say like, here's some reading for you, take this and think about it. Because I think a lot of folks like a month ago didn't even think that that taking money from the police was an option, right? A lot of people maybe a month ago didn't think that, and I'm not even now I'm not talking about abolition, right? I'm talking about a separate idea, right? Like something that is perhaps a step to abolition, but I mean on a basic level, people were like, well, yeah, I mean police probably should have tanks or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? And I feel like in the past month, we've seen at least a shift with the comfort of talking about what it looks like to take money from police and put it elsewhere. Because, and I think here too, I'll say this, like, for folks who, because what these protests have done is put a lot of new people in the street too. And so I feel like this isn't like a joke and this isn't funny, but it's like funny in a way that's not funny. But one thing I saw here was when shit got real hot and police came out with the like, before the National Guard came through town and police came out with like the military grade shit, you could see on people's faces like, oh, I didn't know police had that. You know what I mean? Like, and that's
the cops who were like, yo, we got this.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And you could see the gears turning in people's heads where it was like, damn, I don't know if police should have that. Like, I don't know if police should have like a ton of SWAT tanks, Yeah. And so I think even just like visualizing the military grade weaponry, like police one day out here, just like the amount of riot gear they had on, like you could tell people in the crowd were like, yo, why do you have that? Like, why do you have that? And I'm just here. Like, I'm just here in like a t-shirt and shorts.
To fight
You know
us.
what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, like what? And when you see it like that, the divide becomes super clear, right? The us versus them divide becomes super clear when you see a group of protesters lined up on a street in their like everyday normal clothes that they have access to in their homes, and you see police in like full on riot gear with tanks.
Like from an optics perspective, I mean, the police got blown out. Like just
Yeah.
like you know they
blew the 3-1 lead. It was the 3-1. You know, they had the 3-1 lead. They blew it.
You know, they're putting a bunch of contested long twos, giving up the lane. I mean, it was just outrageous. It's like, okay, let me see what's happening in America. A man in full riot gear pushing a small woman onto the curb. Okay, let's look over here. Spraying an unarmed man in the face with mace after pulling down his mask during a pandemic. Ooh. I mean, it was just over and over and over to the point of it was almost sickening. And I was also very excited by this in the way of this is going to get everywhere. The media couldn't change it. The media was getting shot at with pepper spray and rubber bullets. They were getting shoved with shields. And you're like, this is undeniable in a way that you can't have the typical commenter. Well, where's the whole video? I didn't see the first minute and a half. Like, it was right there. And we looked at the poll numbers and it was like people who were big supporters of the police, their how they felt about the police diminished rapidly over the course of like a week.
Technology, man, it's like this has been happening for centuries, and we finally are all documentarians, right?
Right, yeah. And I think, I mean, it is fair to say, though, like, as bad as so many of the optics were, and as much as that shifted some public opinion, it remains to be seen how that actually, and I do see that there is some progress in some places, but it does remain to be seen how that impacts the powerful institution of the police and the ideas set in place by policing. But yeah, I mean, optics wise, and how this like really just in real time, like you could see people's ideas shifting now. Whether those ideas can be sustained is also another thing. But I'm not surprised by much these days, you know. But I have to admit that like the rapid pace at which I saw some of the ideas shift in communities here was immensely surprising.
When we had talked about defunding the police like a month ago, maybe on this show, and I had mentioned that to a guest we had, our friend Nikki, a couple episodes ago, and she brought up the exact same point you did, that people have already done this thinking for you. It's already there. You can go and look it up. You can go read it. People have put the brain power into this well before we can discover it for ourselves. So when the abolition of police came up, I went and did a bunch of reading. And all makes sense to me. I didn't have to come through and parse things out for myself. It's there. As you said, people have been talking about this for a long period of time, figuring out the linguistics, figuring out the dialogue. And you look at it like, this makes sense. We need to put our resources into preventing crime in the first place and making it a better city, a better society for everyone. And then we don't need cops. And you're like, just explain it like that. That works.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thankful for the work. Let me say I'm thankful for the work that's been done, because one thing that feels important to say is that I did not come to this stuff on my own.
Same. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
And like probably I can say the majority of my life, I knew I didn't. I grew up in an over-policed area. I grew up getting fucked with by police. Am I allowed to curse on here? Sorry, I've been cursing a lot.
Let it fly, man.
All right, I figured, but
yeah, I grew up. Until we talk about the Knicks.
I grew up getting fucked with by police, and so I think if that's your existence, you just don't. I knew I hated the police, and a lot of my homies hated the police, but we thought they were just really woven into the fabric of the country and were immovable. And so then it became about how do we circumvent interactions with the police, as opposed to like how do we organize around, and so, I would say, yeah, for the majority of my life until like my 20s, some point in my 20s, I just didn't have this imagination or this thinking that this world was possible.
Yeah, and I have a weird take on this. That wasn't my idea, to your guys' point, but my whole thing was like refund the police, and that's a difficult conversation to have. But I'm like, we all know we don't like crime. Like, crime is something I'm not into, and I think that has to be said, right? Like, because we need some sort of way to like for lack of a better word, like police it. And this is right. Like, I mean,
go on.
I mean, we can't have people committing murder, right?
Yeah, but I also think that with enough, or my hope is that with enough community resources, I'm gonna say this. I grew up in a neighborhood where the police like only came to fuck with folks, right? And otherwise, we were kind of left to handle our own business. And there weren't like a rash of murders in my neighborhood. There weren't, and I look to the suburbs now, right? The suburbs in the city I live in now are not policed in the way that a lot of the other neighborhoods are policed, and they're not dealing with a rash of crime, right? And some of this, so there's two things on the spectrum there. The communities like one that I grew up in, there is, I don't even want to call it policing, but there's a level of community care that rises to the occasion that gets folks what they need, right?
This is exactly what I mean. Like refund it, re-educate, tear it down and build it back up. And that takes money because the house is infected with roaches. You need to tear it down, but you can't just leave the lot blank.
See, I think you can.
I think you can. Yeah, I'm in favor of leaving the lot blank.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, first
and
of all, only like
but I also don't mean
20%
like
of murders get solved. Like that idea that like murders get solved by cops. No, they don't.
Well,
cops don't solve murders.
I also don't think you can tear down. I don't think you can leave the lot blank like tomorrow. Like I'm not.
Yeah, exactly right.
Like I think that this has to be like a gradual, because I think also there has to be just like a relearning of how to be alive in the country, right?
Yes, right.
Like that is the whole other thing outside of which has happened before, and I think will happen. It's a struggle that will be ongoing for hopefully as long as all of us are alive and then after, right? But I think leaving the lot blank requires a rebuilding of something that is not police in the lot, but that also that requires just a drastic relearning of how to live in the country with other people, because even without like physical actual police officers, there are modes of policing that infiltrate neighborhoods, right, that like happen on suburban message boards, or like all of these things that like stand in for policing when police aren't present. And I would like to see that be reimagined as well. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and me and Ben always debate the idea of peer pressure versus being a peer cop, right? Like saying someone like, you cannot say stay safe anymore. That's not cool. I'm like, well, we're in a pandemic, so like what am I allowed to say in an email? And I think I agree, like, with your point that we need to restructure the entire way we think. And I've been using this Joel Santana kind of like what the game's been missing, like visual analogy, which is like you can take the pawns off of a chessboard, but the king and queen remain. And the object of the game is to get the king. And you know the weakest, if you can take down the queen, then you're in business. And
you always got to get the pawns first, though.
You can avoid the pawns. Like you almost don't have to worry about the pawns.
I'm not an expert chess player. Can you avoid the pawns? Can you really avoid the pawns to get to the?
You got to get some.
Yeah.
You always have,
to get like one pawn
pawns
out of the way, right?
You got to get some pawns.
Well, you're required to move the pawns, so you can circumvent them if you're good enough.
Now I'm outside of the metaphor itself, and I'm thinking about chess. Like I'm not a big chess player, so I've only ever seen chess played in like movies where it doesn't really get played. It's just like things get moved while people pensively talk about. Larger
like the Spanish opening and all those, they're all about like giving up a pawn to take a pawn.
I mean, yeah, but you don't have to concentrate on it. But this is it's a very rap 2001.
This is what we do.
I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, John Oliver had his show this week all about police defunding, and he presented a complexity to it that I enjoyed. And he's with us, like, get rid of it, we have to do it. But he's just like, they are put in a position where they have to be healthcare workers, mental care workers. Like, cops are just like, I can't do all this stuff. I'm not equipped and I'm not trained to like evaluate someone's mental condition on the street, you know? And they have to like chase after cats and dogs, literally, you know? And we're just doing it wrong. And I think it's a gang that we have to break up, and that is complicated because they have a union and they have a lot of rules that help them, and it is maybe, Hanif, to what you said. It's like you don't tear the building down, but you take down room by room until you have nothing left.
Yeah, and in the taking of the building, and taking it down slowly, I think there should be some hand in hand relearning about what the world without the building looks like, and so that there's
an architect should be there planning.
But I think you guys are both right, and it's also that we can reimagine what crime is.
True,
and that kind of goes with to intertwine your guys' ideas here, where like a homeless guy, that's not crime. That should be a different agency. That should be for someone who is not there to punish him or throw him into a cell, but to figure out how to get him into housing. What does he need?
Because of a crime, probably.
Same with addiction. Yeah. Same with lack of education. Whatever it is, those do not need to be the bleeding edge of law enforcement. Those are jobs for other people. And I think that's what you need to do to law enforcement now is start stripping away what it's responsible for, how it interacts with people. And the less interactions between police and the community, and any community, is generally the better.
Yeah. And I think at the end of, in my brain at least, at the end of abolition, what exists are people who are more equipped to do the jobs that have been thrusted upon the police, within communities, right? Yes. But who also need funding to do that. Here, a central tenet of the frustration I have with the schools here, for example, right, is that there's a lot of money spent to get police in Columbus City schools, but there are also schools here that don't have air conditioning. You know what I mean? Schools that have had to shut down, literally shut down on days it's too hot, which are increasing, because of the crisis of the environment. The days that it's too hot to be in school increases and goes longer. Sometimes in September, late September now, it's too hot to be in school. And so these are all things that, at the end of abolition for me, we find a better way to actually serve the people who will then go on to serve the people, because I just don't think it's happening with the police.
It's interesting to see how the one place that's made huge changes already is the one that burned down the precinct.
Yeah,
it wasn't the people who marched and did kneels with the cops. It was the one where the precinct went up in flames. I mean, if that's not a speak to the value of direct action, I'm not sure what does.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if Americans can conceptualize of the abolition of police when it's viewed as get rid of cops. But when it's described in these ways that I think we've been trying to get to, it starts making a lot more sense. It's what parts of your government serve the people in what ways.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm just thankful for the work that's been done on it, because I do think that because there are countless resources, people who are now asking genuine questions, people who are coming to this just genuine questions, but what would I do about blank? There's there's a resource for that a resource that could attack it better than I could in real time. Because I think that one thing I found myself running into was I think a lot of people, where it's I have these thoughts in my head and I have these beliefs in my head, but it's hard for me to articulate them well in real time, but so I'm thankful there are places where I could be check out this thing I read that helped me get here, and maybe it'll help you get there too. When I have these questions,
it's so valuable. When Quo's question, what do you do about murders? It's well, there's a thing called restorative justice, and you can go and read about it, and it's an attempt to come up with an answer to your solution. What do you do about murder?
And this is what we've done.
This is better than jails. This is how we would propose it. And it's you can find links to articles about it. People have done this thought exercise.
And this is basketball related, right? Because I am thinking that now we need to take a turn towards stats, and we've all become amateur capologists in the last 5 years. We know how the cap is structured. We can talk about guaranteed contracts, free agency with a dexterity that we couldn't before, and there's resources for this, and there's always been resources for this. And then you have the guy who's Kobe's number one, and it's okay, and we have to talk about that because that's a legit opinion, right?
Yeah. I'm glad we made a gentle pivot to basketball. Good job there on that.
Well, Hanif, I wanted to talk to you about this specifically because I really loved your future essay and about grief and about the death of your mom, and I kind of shared the same experience, but instead of future, who is the best, and you're right about all that. Like, I look towards basketball and the Knicks, and when my mom passed away, I was so looking forward to just sitting down and like watching a game after dealing with all that for like a year or two, just like when people die, there's things that you have to do, which I didn't know until it happened, and it was an awesome, joyous experience, but also like really melancholy, and I'm jealous because Future was so good and the Knicks were so bad, and I think I think we're grieving a little bit as a country. And is the NBA coming back? Is it the right time?
I don't know. So a thing I've been struggling with is that I've been too emotionally and mentally drained to even miss sports, and I am someone who loves sports. But it's just been, and I'm not just talking about the past 2 weeks. I'm talking about like since lockdown began. But there's also been like no test case for this. Like I tried to watch some Bundesliga when it came back, and I was like, I don't know, without the crowd, it's a little, I don't know. But I think the NBA will be a big test for me because I think as emotionally and mentally drained as I've been, I will probably give in and watch the NBA because I love it. It's a familiar, comfortable thing for me. Now, would I prefer that the NBA didn't come back? Absolutely. I mean, I'm just not that interested in a season that stretches from July to proposed October. I'm not interested in what that does for the timeline of the next season. I think that a lot of people would understand if this season did not complete itself. The players, I understand the players want to get back out, and so I get why. But as a fan, I wasn't really clamoring for a return to the NBA this season, and I would have loved it if they just kind of like put a bow on the season where it was. Don't have a champion. Let's get to the draft lottery. Let's get to the draft.
Yes.
And then like start summer league in the empty gyms or whatever, maybe, do like an Orlando summer league, and then turn an eye towards next season. Part of this too, my favorite team obviously will not be restarting with the rest of the league. And so, I'm sure part of my bias is rooted in that, wanting to see a fresh start for the team I root for with the next season. But I also just, I know I'm being a hypocrite undoubtedly because I know when it kicks off, I will be there. I'll be there like with all the other fans who, otherwise maybe felt like they couldn't. A lot of my homies have been like, I'm just too exhausted to care about the NBA. But I know that when it kicks off, like we'll be right there. We'll all be there, kind of where we were. But my hope was that it would just, put a ball on this season and wait till next.
I'm with you. I'm a Sixers fan, so like they're going to be playing. But as much as I miss basketball in theory, and I miss the game, I don't miss the sport in the way that I want it to come back right now. There's other bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
I don't need to say, oh, we could have gone to a protest, but instead I, wanted to watch the Sixers play. Like, yeah. I don't need that. It feels very opiate-ish in some sense, and maybe counterproductive. Because there's going to be some ceremonies, and Adam Silver is going to bring out his Kenti cloth. It'll be great.
God, I hope not. I will say that I think because of the way, so many people's lives I know have been reshaped by the past several months, and I think even the way we enjoy sports, even the way like I enjoy sports, I know some people enjoy sports, is going to be reimagined within a context of hopefully like making a healthy space for other things, but. As much as I don't like buying into the romanticism of sports as an escape, I think it is true that undoubtedly I turn to the narratives and the games as a way to detach myself from something else. Even though most of my sports watching is rooted in misery because most of my favorite teams across sports lines are not great, except for my beloved Columbus Crew,
nice,
who are mostly good sometimes. But I think that the way I prioritize sports might look different. That said, I'm a lifelong NBA fan. I'll always love the NBA. I've grown to love the NBA even more since I gave up football a few years back, like I said earlier, and I think that the NBA was already top tier for me, and now it's become even more so. So there are some things and some storylines I'm excited about, without question.
I've really enjoyed just thinking about basketball from the past, almost taking this as a necessary way to appreciate, and it wasn't just The Last Dance. Going back and thinking about players like Lamar Odom, man, he was awesome. Let me go watch Lamar Odom highlights. You're like, this is really enjoyable, like reacquainting myself with players that I always enjoyed, but now we need to see Zion. We got to see the new guys, and that's natural, and I love all the new players. But kind of taking a breather and craving basketball at the same time has given me some appreciation for maybe not too many Timberwolves, but like Stephon Marbury. Like, hadn't really thought about him as a player in a while. Going back and watching him, like,
really
Steph
good.
was gnarly. He was a prototype of the scorer distributor guard, along with AI, but we don't talk about him. And I don't know, I think I've kind of gained a bit of a deeper understanding of the game, or at least I've enjoyed kind of delving into guys from the past who I'd sort of let slip aside.
Oh yeah, I mean, capital S some guys, right? Like I love Terrell Brandon. Terrell Brandon was a big because the thing that happened when the NBA went away was, for me, one of my vices, I don't have a lot of social media vices. Like, I don't follow a lot of like celebrities or a lot of like brand type accounts, but on Instagram I weirdly follow a lot of like throwback basketball accounts. But this thing that had happened when the pandemic hit and the basketball, it was the old highlight videos just rolled in, and it was just really wonderful to sit for the first couple of weeks and be like watching old highlights of folks. And there was this Terrell Brandon mixtape. I growing up in Ohio, I didn't grow up a Cavs fan, but I loved Terrell Brandon when he was on the Cavs, and then of course he went to the Wolves, and I was thrilled. He played for the Cavs in an era where I kind of most loved the Cavs, when they had those jerseys that were like the that they brought back this year with the like chalk, the bluish chalk type thing.
Yeah, I like those. Those are good.
And so I love Terrell Brandon. He's one of those guys where and there are a lot of guys like that in the NBA for me who were like maybe 1 or 2 time All-Stars, if that. Sharif Abdurrahim is another one. Guys who often like played for not great teams, but were good on those not great teams. I recently wrote about Kevin Martin, who was a high school player who came up in Central Ohio. And Kevin Martin is, if not for LeBron James being in high school at the exact same time, would be, maybe if LeBron James went to high school in another state, Kevin Martin would be maybe remembered as one of the greatest Ohio basketball players to ever play. It's just that he got drowned out in the LeBron era. But he's kind of like a prototype of that. There are a lot of Columbus area folks, like Michael Redd is another one, who like, but there's those folks who like either never made an all-star team or like only barely made one, but were really great to watch, And so that's like my kind of player in a way.
And then, on Twitter or Instagram, you just see those videos floating around, and it's just like, Cherokee Parks was a problem. Tom Gugliotta was a bucket.
Tom Gugliotta was a bucket.
He was a bucket.
Tom Gugliotta, he couldn't do much he was not much of a defender. He didn't move his feet well. But he could.
Back injury, right?
Yeah, he had the back problems.
Stoyo Vrankovic was different.
My go-to is always Bob Sura, because Bob Sura was kind of a threat to go triple-double on a weekly basis, and he wasn't especially great at everything, but he was such like a Lamar Odom kind of unit multitasker, right?
He had hops too. Bob Sura was like sneaky, and I know that I almost let myself say sneaky athletic, and I know that like everyone always says that with the white players, so they're like, oh, Chase Budinger was like sneaky, had sneaky hops, but Bob Sura was athletic.
Yeah,
he was another Cav from that, like Cleveland Cavalier from that era, and I liked him. I thought he was all right. I mean.
And that was those Florida guys were always like
Florida
State.
Bob Sura was like Florida State.
We would joke that they were like the new whites. Like, oh, they got some of those new whites. They could jump. Like Jason Williams. Like, oh, they're new
Mike
whites.
Miller. Yeah.
Mike Miller. Yes. Who just he had a viral tweet or viral video.
Viral video, right?
Cooking
Yeah.
somebody.
Which, I mean, I think people never understand, because I saw that tweet and I told this little story on Twitter about how when I was a teenager, Antonio Daniels is from here. He's from he's from North Columbus. He played at a high school called St. Francis de Sales, where Clark Kellogg's kids played. And Antonio Daniels, when I was a teenager, he would come back to Columbus, and he was maybe on the tail end of his career, and Antonio Daniels, like, all respect, could hoop, but, like, wasn't a star. And he would come back to Columbus and play at the North YMCA, and he would show up in, like sandal. He'd be playing these games in like sandals and in cargo pants or whatever the fuck, and going like 30%. But he would make the best players in the gym, like ex-college players, like make them look like fools. And I remember being on the side courts and watching, and that's kind of when I realized there's just such a large gap between an NBA player and everyone else. Like Mike Redd, when Mike Redd would come back to Columbus every now and then, he would occasionally get in these like, these runs, and he would only shoot threes. He wouldn't dribble. He would just only shoot threes, take it easy, and he was just lights out. And so seeing that Mike Miller,
that was Antonio Davis after Allen Iverson removed both of his ankles. That was one of the worst crossovers in NBA history.
It was. I loved Iverson. I'm glad that he's kind of gotten his flowers in a way. Truly.
The logo, yeah, we always say on Cookies, the NBA started when he was drafted. Everything beforehand doesn't matter. He was
bunch of guys putting up drywall in their spare time.
Yeah. Hanif, how come you were a Timberwolves fan? What made you go there?
I mean, largely the newness of the franchise in KG. So my family, most of my parents and my other siblings, with the exception of one brother, are from New York, and we're kind of like default Knicks fans. And I came up in an era where, Jordan and the Bulls and the Knicks, that was a big rivalry, but I wasn't that excited about it. I liked Michael Jordan as much as anyone my age, like Michael Jordan coming up in the 90s, but I wasn't like thrilled about Michael Jordan. And I didn't like the Cavs because no one in my house liked the Cavs. Growing up in Columbus, you're not like in Cleveland. You're in Central Ohio, and in some ways the Cavs feel distant, even though you could catch their games, on the local broadcast. Our local broadcast, we got WGN. We didn't have cable a lot, so we got WGN and saw the Bulls games, and then we got the local like Ohio broadcast for Cavs games. But the Timberwolves came to the league when I was really coming into my own as a sports fan. And Kevin Garnett came in the league when I was coming in my own as a sports fan, and I really latched on to him. I latched on to a high school player coming in and taking the league by storm. And because of these local Midwest broadcasts, we somehow, even though, to be clear, the Twin Cities are a far trip away from Columbus, but we would get these games. We'd get these local Timberwolves games from time to time, and I just really loved them. I fell in love with them early, and I followed them ever since, which was maybe a mistake. It's a team. There's something. I recently told a friend, I don't even know what I'd do with myself if the Timberwolves were great. They have been great maybe one season of my life. The Cassell Sprewell season where they got to the
I was going to say,
WCF.
underrated team. Yeah.
That was the one time in my life where they were maybe great. They have been good at other times in my life. I think the prime Garnett years where they just kept kind of running into Duncan, they were good. They were still a very good team. But for the majority of my life, particularly my adult life, they have been just unmistakably bad. And not like even the year with Jimmy where they got to the playoffs, I would not say that team was very good. I would say that Jimmy Butler.
I like that team, but Jimmy Butler's injury really did.
It did him in, right?
It did waylay that squad.
But I also think that I don't think the team was good. I think Jimmy Butler has a very unique desire to win that can push a team to great heights. But I think Wiggins was still bad. Wiggins was still bad that year.
Ooh.
And
was he ever good?
Was he ever good? Yeah. The point guard situation was still a mess that year. And coming into this year, there was this. It's wild how sports tricks us. You know what I mean? Like how even though we know better, we can allow ourselves to get wrapped up. Because I don't know if y'all remember when the Timberwolves started this year, they looked amazing. For the first maybe 8 to 10 games, They looked incredible. And all of my Timberwolves friends, all of us are telling ourselves the same thing, where it's like, this, don't fall into this. This is, like, let's wait till 20 games. Like, let's wait till this sustains itself. But I was still so caught up. I was like, yo, this is a year where, they're not going to win the finals, but maybe this is the year they make it to the playoffs without, maybe this is the year Wiggins is good too. That was the thing, because he had a run of games where it was like, I think Wiggins has turned the corner. But then
me and Ben were convinced that they were just showcasing him to the Knicks. It's like, they're just giving him the keys to the car because they're just going to ship him to Dolan.
Well, so how are you feeling about the future of the team now? They only played, I don't know, 11 games after they got
the trade.
D'Lo and Cat, and they were not good in those 11 games.
Yeah, I mean, Cat was hurt for some of them.
That was besides the point, really.
Yeah.
So these are two young guys. Neither one is really much of a defender, but they're both like legitimate high-level, high-ceiling offensive players. I mean, Cat might be the best offensive big man ever. Like,
Cat
I don't think that's like weird to say.
He's an apex player.
He's one of the best bigs who's ever graced the planet. Not a great defender, but he is that good at
But what's wild about Cat? What's wild about Cat is that in college he was a good defender. He was on that. I don't know if y'all are college basketball fans or whatever, but
Kentucky team was good.
That Kentucky team, people, what's wild is like people were writing shit about that Kentucky team. Like, could this Kentucky team beat the 96 Bulls? Like real serious shit. Where it's like, but on that, and they ended up losing to like Wisconsin, they ended up like losing to Frank Kaminsky. But like Cat was at least maybe not an elite defender in college, but had the tools. The thing with him coming out of college is like, even if he doesn't pan out offensively, he can be an elite rim protector. And so I think he has the tools, but maybe not the desire. But
oddly enough, that was the story on Wiggins too.
There's the thing on Wiggins too. Yeah, the thing on Wiggins is like,
he's going to be a great wing defender.
He's going to be an elite wing.
Don't worry about that.
And it never panned out. I will say. So I think the new look Timberwolves, there are. The one thing that Gerson Rosas did that I don't think got a lot of attention was that he just cleared out so much money. Like, he cleared out so much bad money. And bought in like, I think at the end of whenever this season ends, there will be some money to kind of bolster. This is not a great free agent class, but I don't think the Timberwolves need like a home run free agent. They just need to like fill out some bench spots. They need to fill out, because I love Beasley. I've loved Beasley for a long time, and when they got Beasley, I was so excited because I knew what he could do, but he was just kind of buried on that Nuggets bench that's just deep with backcourt players. But Malik Beasley's great. I think
I'm a Wancho guy. I think
I'm a big Wancho guy. Yeah, I think they got Wancho for cheap. I think D'Lo and Cat are going to work the pick and roll really well together. Neither of them will defend the pick and roll well, but they'll work it on the offensive end well together. And I think they're still missing some things. Will Jarrett Culver and Josh Okogie are both very, like, I would say Okogie is an elite defender, and Jarrett Culver is a very good defender. But I'm worried. I just don't think Okogie's ever going to be able to be an effective offensive player. Like, I just don't think it's going to happen. Immensely athletic, but like, cannot shoot. We'll never be able to shoot.
We kind of know how Rosas operates. We may not know his worldview or how he, does the small things, but we kind of know the worldview because we know Hinkie and we know and Daryl Morey. These guys are like econometric whizzes. They're looking for guys who are undervalued. They're looking for guys who play certain roles, and generally speaking, they'll probably figure it out.
Yeah.
I would assume that you may not strike gold, but at some point, Rosas is going to make enough good decisions that they will pile up to working. In the same way that it worked for the Nets for a while, or the Sixers ended up getting talent like Covington, or the Rockets work. Like, being a good GM, you can get lucky or get unlucky, and those things may ultimately seal your fate. But you can't really be upset at having a guy like Rosas calling the shots.
And I think, the Timberwolves have, as of now, they have 2 draft picks. I think they're still going to keep the draft picks because one of them is just protected, but I think they're going to get that protection through. And this is a bad draft, but what is good in this draft is that, like, there's a lot of elite defenders in that like 12 to 20 range. The thing I'm worried about, I actually think the Timberwolves should try to trade their Where depending on where the lottery shakes them out, they should maybe try to trade their high pick because all signs lead to them drafting LaMelo Ball.
Oh my God, I love him so much.
I
You don't like LaMelo?
I don't dislike LaMelo. I don't think LaMelo's a good fit. But the problem is I don't know who is a better fit. Like that's the real problem. Because like Wiseman's not a good fit next to Cat. Or maybe he is, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Like it doesn't make sense at all. And Edwards, so many draft pundits have compared Edwards to like a potential Wiggins, where it's just like high volume shots, a lot of like long twos. Terrified of him. I watched him play a few times this year, and I was like, yo, like everyone's telling me he's good, but I just see like a volume shooter, like bad shot selection. And I know some of that just comes with being like the guy in college, like having to shoot through double teams and whatnot. But I'm really afraid of him. And so like I appreciate that LaMelo might be the most logical pick actually. But I'm worried about the fit. I'm worried about LaMelo's defense, like really worried about his defense. Because while I think that Cat can be a better defender, I don't think D'Lo's going to be a better defender.
I don't know how LaMelo will be as a defender, but my general rule of thumb is just amassing guys who are smart basketball players and good at basketball.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like a weird, bizarre way of putting it, but just like good at basketball. You see the floor, you make the right pass, you rebound, you push the ball. And like seeing what shakes out. I'd much rather have those guys than like an Andrew Wiggins. You're like, all right, well, you can sort of shoot. You don't really stand in the right place. You kind of don't cut. You don't see the guy until a second too late. Like, give me a LaMelo, and like I'll sort out the rest. I love all those players.
Yeah.
Ben Simmons, Draymond Green, Jokic. Give me a plus passer, and I figure you can sort out
work it out.
Rest of the lineup.
I do love Jokic. I was thinking about him last night because, since the Wolves aren't back, I've got to find another team to latch on to, and I want a team that is perhaps equally as frustrating. And weirdly, a lot of people were like, the Nuggets. And I was like, no, the Nuggets are actually good. But I do worry, what I love about Jokic is that he's someone who played himself, and we watched him like play himself into shape in real time. Like he has the energy of like, why would I work out when my job is working out? You know what I mean? And I love that. I love a guy who's like, I'm going to show up out of shape and then give me like 10 to 15, 20 games. Then I'll be great.
Well, someone's going to come in enormous. We just don't know who it's going to be yet.
Oh, yeah. I think it's going to be him.
Quarantine and they put on 40 pounds. You're like, dude, it's the playoffs. You got like 6 games to get ready. It might be Jokic.
I think it's going to be him. It might be Luka.
Oh, yeah. The Nacho King.
Yeah, it could be Luka. But I also think like Luka's more equipped to like, I don't know, but Luka always looks like he's in slow motion even when he's not.
It's like Anthony Davis shows up at like 350 pounds. Like, how did this happen?
Please let Marcus Smart come in fat. Like, that would be amazing.
I would love it. Those are the folks I love a player who has a body that resembles something at least close to my body. It makes me feel like more at one with the game I love. And so I'm all for... Listen, yeah, I'm all for all the players coming back out of shape. Like, I hope everyone's out of shape. I'm sure LeBron won't be out of shape because he's like a robot.
James Harden might come in like cylindrical.
Yeah, I would love it. And I would love it if...
He lost weight, right?
He did. Amazing. You're right. He looks really skinny. That clip of him boxing over last summer where he just looks like a middle-aged man was so rewarding.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I know that I should not be advocating for out-of-shape athletes, but my favorite athletes are, I was like a big Khalid El Amin fan. Like I love an athlete who's like out of shape and still getting it done. I don't know. And I feel like one that's more entertaining for me, because I can see myself reflected on the court. I love representation. But two, it's just like, I don't know. No one should be in shape I'm anti people being in shape as I work. I mean, I'm preparing to go on a run later.
But you're right, though. If you look back at even 10 years ago, there were guys like Oliver Miller or Jerome James. There are none of them in the league anymore.
No.
There are no cylindrical men in the NBA like there were during that era. Who was the other guy? Eddie Curry. There was a few guys who were like rotund individuals, and they've been body shamed.
Was in shape for a second.
They've been body shamed out of the NBA.
I mean, Mike Sweetney, they're all Knicks. They're all
All
Knicks.
Knicks. Are
But,
the
yeah.
Is there a way? And not sorry that I'm turning the questions to you, Andrew, but
No.
is there a way that the Knicks are going to at any point progress past the kind of stagnation they've been? Because I think I like, as I grew up in a house with Knicks fans. I'm not a Knicks fan, but I like living in a world where the Knicks are at least competitive. And so I want the Knicks to kind of turn a corner, but I just don't. I'm looking at I was looking at the roster and I look at the moves and I just don't know how it's possible. I know they did a lot of those 2-year contracts, so in a year they're going to have a lot of money, but
They might not have. They might have money this year because a lot of those were, I think, team options. But
oh yeah.
I stand by the idea. James Dolan is a specific type of person, and I don't know if he's built to run a basketball team, and I don't think he's built to be many things. And I think the Knicks are inherently flawed, but I believe many teams are inherently flawed. For example, the Cleveland Cavaliers and Dan Gilbert.
Oh yeah.
All it takes is a lottery ball, LaMelo ball, or something like that. Because as I always say on this pod, we rightfully roast the Knicks for just being inept. But if a lottery ball goes a different way and we get John Morant, we don't talk about them in those terms.
Right.
But Dolan had done nothing to produce that result. If we get Zion Williamson, we're back. I'm like, no, the lottery ball just went there, but I'm happy we have Zion. R.J. Barrett was a really poor number 3 pick, but he was the third best player. So I believe it's mostly ineptitude and a lot of bad luck, and we could be good as soon as 2 years from now.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say this sort of ties together a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, where things seem impossible until they're not. Okay, the Knicks, they're going to be bad forever. Oh, wait, something changed. The talent changed, or the philosophy changed. Someone in charge changed. I think that's what gives me optimism to some degree, because, all right, so every team in the NBA has a power forward that's basically a smaller version of a center. All they do is rebound, play defense, push some people around. Mike D'Antoni shows up and is like, you don't have to do that, right? You can just have him stand really far away, and then everything's clear around the paint, and the game is totally different. And you will never think of power forwards the same way again. And I'm like, maybe we can do that for other things. Maybe we can view the old police as an Oakley-like enforcer. And now the new police can be a better version of a power forward. But that idea, that all it takes is the idea and someone implementing it for everyone to open their eyes and say, whoa, we were doing this like fools. And now you look at those lineups where a Sixers team had George Lynch, Tyrone Hill, Mutombo, and Snow in the starting lineup, and you say, why on earth did we ever do that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that, and my hope is that the Knicks get that lottery ball. I mean, I know this draft isn't ideal, but I think coming drafts will be. I mean, I think this last draft also wasn't that ideal, honestly. Obviously Zion and Ja are great, but I think I struggle to think about who the 3rd, 4th, or 5th best rookies have been this year. I mean, well, I guess it depends on what you look for. Matisse Thybulle's been good.
I'm a Thibault guy for sure.
But I think the Knicks, that's just, as we're saying, it's going to come down to just getting a better lottery pick. All right, the Knicks have only had a top 4 pick once up until last year, and they got Porzingis. They got their guy, and they ended up trading him away.
And we're going to have to wait another year because, barring any upset in probability, the prospect of getting a top 4 pick is probably gone now.
Well, the time to be awful was before they flattened the odds, and the Knicks decided against that.
But it's still always time to be awful. You can still try to get a number 1 pick. That's not off the table.
I love that, never a bad time to be awful is the motto.
Yeah. I wish, not to borrow a line from The Last Dance, but the Knicks are never in the present. And it's time for them to be awful every second until they're not awful, because the lottery rewards losses. I agree that this draft isn't great this year, but I see 4 people on the board that I would love to have. LaMelo, Killian Hayes, Okonwu, Halliburton would be great, but I don't even think we're going to be in the running for Halliburton.
Wait, you don't like you don't like Danny Avdija?
Oh. Avdija?
Yeah.
He blew up in the tournament. Like his stats were modest, and then they played the championship round, and he looked like Lamar Odom. So I'm very interested in him. He doesn't shoot well, which bums me out.
But it feels like he could shoot well. Like if his shot doesn't look like fucked up. It looks like he could eventually shoot well. But of course, like he could eventually also never shoot well.
Right. He's a project, which is not something that's enticing. But if he's there at number 8 or 9. Absolutely, right? Because R.J. Hampton is also a project.
But the Knicks also they're in a great spot where they have nothing. There's nothing that's not replaceable. I think Mitchell Robinson is super talented, and I think he's the lone bright spot on that roster right now. But you can draft any position. There's no chance of a redundancy at this point. It doesn't matter. You just take the best possible guy who's there, which is kind of liberating, I guess.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask Hanif, because this is very Timberwolves related. Do you draft for need, or do you draft for talent? Because I feel like you guys are notorious for drafting Johnny Flynn and Ricky Rubio in the same lottery, right?
Oh gosh, yeah. And I mean, although they traded him, they also drafted Ty Lawson that year.
Oh, not bad. That's solid.
They traded but I mean, yeah. I think if I were a GM, I'd draft for talent, because in this draft at least, because there's no good fit, across the board. Like what the Timberwolves need, I think they need some like long, talented defenders, but at the top of this draft, that's just not what you're gonna see. Wiseman might be.
Would you be happy with Weissman and Cat?
I just don't see it working. Like, I know there are some Timberwolves fans who believe that it would work, like a Twin Towers type situation, especially because Cap, can go inside and outside. But I just don't know how effective that is in today's NBA. I don't think we're gonna get like Robinson, Duncan, and to be clear, like Robinson was also on the back end of the career there, and so I don't think still very good. Don't get me wrong, David Robinson was still very good, but was kind of like. Veteran for sure. I don't know if you're going to get 2 young, active centers. And also, to be frank, like I just didn't see enough of Wiseman to know how effective he is moving around. I know that in college his rim protection looked effective in the few games I saw, and he's a really skilled post player. But I don't know if I'd be excited about that. Truthfully, all roads point to LaMelo as a smart choice if he's available.
Oh my God, I'll be so jealous.
And I think that might be, and all the mock drafts also point to LaMelo. But I also like Isaac Okoro a lot. Like I think he's someone who I am excited about because of his defense. Like I watched a lot of those games he played in this year, and he's got some Okogie energy, because I do think that his offense is far behind his defense. But I also think that his offense has the potential to improve, where I think Okogie is the offensive player he's going to be.
A lot of advanced metrics have painted Cat as like one of the worst defensive players in the league. Yeah. Do you think, not to say that you should defend or go against those particular metrics, but how big a problem is his defense in terms of why the Timberwolves have not made a lot of progress, especially on that side of the ball? Like, is that a Cat problem?
I don't think it's solely a Cat problem, but I think particularly and specifically his inability to guard the pick and roll is just like, when you see it, like it's one thing to like look at the metrics and see it written about, but when you see it in the game, it's like, oh no, he really is just like gets lost. Right, he gets lost when the screen comes and cannot find his way to making a decision. So the reason I think Cat's defense can improve is because so many of the flaws of it are on a decision-making level and not on a physicality level, or not on a desire level. Although I think that some people who watch him might disagree with me there, which is fair. But I think so many of it's like timing and decision-making. He struggles in the pick and roll because it doesn't seem like he's reading it well, and he doesn't know he doesn't read a switch very well.
There's some guys who just don't necessarily get spatial understanding that well.
Yeah.
They don't really know how to get to where they need to be, and it may not be an athletic thing. It may not be an intellectual thing. It's just saying, you don't see this play materializing the way that other people do. Or maybe he doesn't have great lateral movement. Maybe he just can't slide that well to the side in the way that one would anticipate someone who is generally as nimble as he is could do.
Yeah, I mean, and I think at the rim, he almost kind of jumps backwards.
Interesting.
Or, you see him jumping at the rim and he kind of like...
Someone should mention that to him. Dude, jump forwards.
Yeah, it's
Stop the jumping backwards thing.
He almost... And part of this, I think, is because he's prone to getting into foul trouble. And he seems to be super aware of that. And so he, at the rim, when he meets players at the rim, it's almost like he's thinking about not getting a foul called on him. So that reduces some of the tenacity he meets people at the rim with, which I also think is correctable. A thing that I don't want to wade too deep in the waters of, because I do like him, is that I don't know if Ryan Saunders is the coach to kind of like push the team to the next level. I like Ryan Saunders a whole lot, and I know Kat likes him a whole lot, and I also appreciate. And I don't mean sentimentality as a dismissive thing, but I appreciate the sentimentality of Ryan Saunders being the Timberwolves coach fully. But I don't know. The thing from this season that I will never be able to shake is watching that collapse against the Kings. Where
that's just a harsh phrase.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
I don't even remember the game, of course, and I'm heartbroken.
It was. I mean, they gave up. Andrew, you remember that game? Did anyone?
I can't say I remember it.
I remember it.
Yeah.
It was historic. They were. I mean, in the fourth quarter, they were up by 17 points with 3 minutes left, and the Kings came back and won. They were up by 7 with 50 seconds left, and the Kings still won. And
was this a Bogdan game? Did Bogdan go off with threes? Am I remembering this?
I think Buddy did.
Oh,
I think it was Buddy who got him. But it was all coaching.
Right. This was
it was
the moment. Right.
It was all coaching. It was all Saunders just making mistake after mistake, and after the game, him kind of shrugging and being things happen. And it's I don't know, man. Things happen, sure, but those things don't happen. There's a reason this was a historic collapse, And so, as much as I'm wondering if Saunders is the coach. I don't know who the coach is. It certainly wasn't Thibodeau. But I also know that Kat loves Ryan Saunders, and Kat also loved Covington, and I'm wondering how much you can take away from Karl Anthony Towns before he. I know that bringing in D'Lo was a big thing to placate him, and I am of the belief that, and I know we're probably over time and I'm rambling, but I'm actually of the belief that the Wolves are going to make a play at Devin Booker. I have no real anything to back this up, and I have no real science, but I think a part of the moves they were making, were to try at least to make a run at Booker.
I mean,
those guys,
NBA
they all seem like buddies, right?
They're best. They're they're incredible friends, and they proclaimed. There was that Slam magazine cover at the beginning of the season where they proclaimed they were going to play together one day,
and we're going to do it in Phoenix.
Oh god.
Well, I feel a bad team affinity with you because the Knicks. Those three players have been rumored among Knicks circles to be the finishing touch of this Dolan masterpiece. Somehow we'll get Kat. When D'Lo was in San Francisco, they're we can trade for him. We have cap space, and we might be able to afford Devin Booker. And I'm that sounds fantastic. But we're much farther behind because you have two of the three of those players.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm someone who I have League Pass, so I watch a lot of teams, and I have this thing called my bad team, good time rankings, where if a team is bad but fun to watch, and inversely I have the good team, bad time rankings, where it's I think about the Hawks. Yeah, the Bucks. The Bucks are perfect. The Bucks are at the top of the list for me because the Bucks are unmistakably good. But I'm never trying to watch the Bucks. I'm not trying to watch
Brooke Lopez,
Brooke
lumbering
Lopez
down the
shooting
court.
threes. Yeah.
I've had it with their dork ball. Quo and I have talked about this many times. I cannot stand the Bucks. They're
They're
optimized version of nerd ball. Get out of here.
Undeniably a good team. Never trying to watch them. On the other end of the spectrum, the Hawks are an atrocious team, but I'm always trying to watch the Hawks.
Yo, Trae Young
always,
is a gift. Yeah.
Like forever trying to watch the Hawks. I think John Collins is exciting when he's on the floor.
Cam Reddish is fun.
Cam Reddish is like occasionally fun. In the Suns, were a team for me, and of course, like the bad team, good time rankings depends on how you determine what a bad team is, and understanding that like the designation of bad team is fluid. Like at one point, the Grizzlies were less good than they were, but they were still a lot of fun to watch. The Grizzlies are like pretty good team, extremely good time, Yep. But the Suns for me are peak bad team, good time, because Devin Booker and Kelly Oubre is always fun.
The Suns have held this role for a long time. Like
they
the
have.
Suns, like when they had Eric Bledsoe,
Steve
Nash, but those teams were really good.
Amari,
Even with Bledsoe, and they were mediocre. I loved watching those Suns teams.
Well, certain franchises.
They go around Dragic and Bledsoe and Isaiah Thomas. Suns, they don't care about being good. They're here to entertain.
And certain teams have that gravity, right? And when we're talking about Garnett and the Wolves had this gravity for like 10 years, where they weren't necessarily contenders, but we cared so much about them. And same with the Suns, right? Like the Sixers, to be honest, is one of those teams. Even when they're not good, there's so much gravity around them. And the Suns, I feel like recently have lost that a little bit. And I don't know if it takes a dynamic playmaker for that to happen. But all these teams that kind of capture our imagination have some sort of basketball genius on them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dallas is a great example of that. You got a guy who you can run the offense through, and all of a sudden, the future is different. This is a different version of a team that we've seen. And I think that's the problem with the Suns. They're trotting out the same version that hasn't worked that well for the last few years. And we like Booker. He's talented. He's fun to watch. But the team itself hasn't really shifted or created a new identity or that sense of promise. And that look at Dallas. They're going to be different. Atlanta, we haven't seen this before. We kind of know what Booker is, and I like him a lot. But that's why it's enticing to imagine him on a different team.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got to go somewhere else, or I think Ayton has to evolve a little quicker, or they've got to get another piece there. But I think that we've hit an era where watching a very good player on a bad team is not as thrilling anymore. It's kind of sad and exhausting because of the ways that players and teams have banded together. And so, I think Beal's time in Washington is I just can't imagine it lasting much longer. Even though I know he signed, but he was another one where we're watching him this season. And to be fair, Washington is still in the playoff race, which is wild. That's an indictment of the Eastern Conference, sure, but it's also a note of praise to Bradley Beal. That Washington roster, with all respect, that roster stinks, man. That roster is bad. Should not even be in the playoff race. There was one Wizards game I watched where Ish Smith was starting, who's an effective guard but not great, right? You just don't want, Ish Smith should not be your starting point guard. And so the fact that Washington's still in the playoff race,
the Wizards team has some. I kind of like the Wizards in their ineptitude. I think you're right. Beal is excellent, and he hasn't gotten the praise he deserves for being kind of one-man army. But I do like kind of a bunch of guys who kind of stand around and shoot threes. They're seeming to embrace an identity as a bunch of chuckers in Beal. And I'm kind of into it. Their defense is putrid, but their offense is probably top 8 or something like that.
They're out of purgatory, right?
Yeah, there's an identity that's brewing. In the NBA, your identity might change by the year, but I kind of like what they've done. We're just going to try to outscore you and take a bunch of charges. That's what we are. Come and play with us, and we're annoying.
Yeah. Yeah, their defense is a nightmare, but I do like watching Davis Bertans shoot a lot.
Bertans, there's gravity with Rui Hachimura. I think he's an intriguing unitasker maybe. I really applaud them for getting out of purgatory. They had a bunch of contracts. They had second and third tier stars.
They're still paying John Wall what, 50 a year,
So
45.
much money.
That's why, and I don't think you had to sign that contract, but we know why they did it, and it's horrible luck. Wall claims he's healthy now. You add him, a healthy Wall, to that team, and I'll absolutely watch it, right?
Yeah.
But Beal is worth a ton on the market, you gotta think. Would we be surprised if Beal was moved at the lottery or at the draft?
I hope he is. I mean, I'm to be fair, I'm a big Bradley Beal fan. You know, early in the season, before the season started, when there was talk of him going to Denver for like one of the guards and, you know, one of the big, well, you know, now I think the value of Gary Harris is less than what it was, but there was talk like Gary Harris and a pick and like MPJ. Like, I thought that was perfect, but I would also take Jamal Murray for, you know, like, I think that either of those, I mean, Gary Harris's value has tanked this year because he's been bad. But yeah, I mean, package Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. and something and send it and get Beal back for Denver. Because I think if you get that, especially if you can keep Murray, but I don't think there's any way you can keep Murray. I think Washington would probably want Murray. Then it kind of, I mean, Denver has such a deep well of talent to pull from, to trade to folks. It makes sense in Denver. I think there was a point where Miami made sense. Although Miami is kind of doing all right without him at this point. You know, Miami is just like, talk about a team that just has a bevy of shooters to pull from. You know, like, they're doing all right. But I hope Bradley Beal goes to a team that he's a guy where I think you want him on a team that is at the precipice of greatness, and he kind of like nudges them over the top, and makes them like a team that can compete for the finals. I would hate to see Bradley Beal go to a team where he would be just kind of either in the bottom of conference or just like scrapping in the middle. And so, yeah.
Well, there's those teams that you mentioned, like Denver and Miami, that are really good, and there is a conceivable way that they could win a championship this year. You know, they could break that way, and they play excellent, and they shoot well, but they just don't seem like it. When you think of who's going to win it this year, like, well, the Bucks, the Lakers, the Clippers. As a Sixers fan, I could say there is a universe in which Simmons and Embiid just play 40 minutes a game, and that's more talent than most teams have. Like, that's plausible. But there's something about those teams, like specifically the Nuggets and Miami, that for as good as they are, it just doesn't feel as if they're good enough to win a championship. And I'm trying to figure out if that's my own just sort of bias against these teams that don't seem to have that equivalent star power or aren't quite as good. Or is my gut instinct like, you know, it still takes LeBron James and Anthony Davis to win a title. It still takes, you know, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Like, yeah, I'm trying to. It's what we've been talking about all this entire episode. Like, how do you change your thinking? Is this an old way of thinking that you need stars or not?
I mean, I think you need stars. I'm gonna be honest.
No, I'm agreeing. I mean,
yeah.
Am I wrong about the poor Nuggets that having just Jokic as a star and a bunch of supporting pieces like that doesn't get it done?
I mean, I think you see teams that have ceilings. Because, I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, I believe that only a small handful, maybe 3 or 4 teams can win a championship this season. Like Lakers, Clippers, Bucks. I personally believe the Celtics actually can, though I understand those who do not. But I think you see teams that have clear ceilings. Like, for example, the project of the Portland Trail Blazers reached its peak last season, right? And I don't think we'll ever see the Blazers surpass the run they went on last year.
I'm sorry. We're talking about the Blazers?
I passed out for a second.
I fell asleep there for a second.
Oh, no, wait. Do y'all hate the Blazers?
Who?
No, but it somehow is so calming. And
I'm so well rested. What were we discussing?
The Blazers have been so blazerish for so long that I'm just like, is it Lillard's year? And I'm like, are we having a discussion in 2015?
Just woke up. What happened, guys?
I mean, I don't think folks have to worry about the Blazers being a point of discussion. I think they're
unless Jokic comes back, or not Jokic, Nurkic comes back, and the other tall cop comes back, and all of a sudden they're just like,
Zach Collins.
Yeah, they're all of a
that
sudden
dude's
they're
a maniac.
Like a threat.
Zach Collins. I don't think Zach Collins is good at anything other than fouling and injuring people, but because he's like big and somewhat like moves well,
Elbows.
there's been this whole thing every season where it's like every season in the league where it's like Zach Collins, this is the year he's gonna make a difference. This is the year he's gonna like really, but he comes in, he fouls people really hard, and that's kind of and he looks like a serial killer.
He's very coppish.
Yeah,
if you're a big guy, and like Hassan Whiteside does not fit the prototype that they had gone with of like big white guys with buzz cuts. They were really mastering energy. Like cop energy.
Yeah.
But they got rid of Myers Leonard, and now he has pink hair. So I don't even know. Maybe it's just a Portland thing.
Myers Leonard has pink hair now. I haven't been peeping the.
Yeah, he was in Miami with pink hair, and you've got Harrow's got braids, and like Miami, you just go there and like mess with your hair.
Yeah, it's a yeah, it's definitely like a hair town.
Hanif, before we end this pod, I wanted to ask you a question. Like, you are a college basketball expert, and it sounds like you really enjoy that thing. Do you think we're looking at the end of this system? You
mean like where you got to go to college for a year and then,
or like paying athletes?
Oh, paying athletes. Well, yes. I mean, I think college basketball is going to be hit hardest and pressured. I think the fastest. Because, I think high school football players, the physicality and the size difference, like, there aren't a lot of different non-college leagues that high school football players could really flourish in. But there are so many different avenues for high school basketball players where they can get money and play and be treated like stars. And so the pressure is really on for, I think, high school or for college basketball. And, a part of me, the purist in me, the kid in me who gathered snacks to watch Duke UNC games when I was a teenager, wants there to be a competitive college basketball landscape. But what I want more than that, what outweighs that is equity for the workers, and the workers are the players, and the players who bring revenue to the colleges. And I want that equity to be achieved by any means possible. And I think for some bigger players, that means not investing in the system anymore. And even with that in mind, my question then becomes, what does that mean for the player who is not being courted by the G League? What does that mean for the 8th person on the bench to the 12th person on the bench? What does that mean for the player who is very good but maybe like needs 2 or 3 years? Someone like Halliburton, right? Because I don't think they should be left behind by the movements either. And so those things are on my mind as always. I really want a healthy and robust college basketball ecosystem, but I think in order to achieve that, paying the players has to be, paying all college athletes, like paying women's college basketball players, who also bring in, because I'm a hoops fan, like cross the board, WNBA fan, like women's college hoops fan, and it's not to be slept on that like women's college basketball also brings a lot of revenue and excitement to these universities. Like, this is just a singular example and the highest level example, but like watching Sabrina and how she shifted how she shifted Oregon last year. Yeah, the current. Yeah, what's wild is I copped the jersey. I copped the jersey on draft night.
It sold out so fast.
It sold out so fast. It was like one of those things I did flippantly. I knew she was gonna get picked first. I was waiting for food somewhere to pick up food, and I was on my phone, and I was like, oh, let me just pop over and get a jersey, because I didn't think they would sell out so quickly. I mean, I should have known, because when her Oregon jersey dropped, it sold out like in minutes. But I maybe just caught the wave right as it hit, and I got my size, and then by the time I got home, they were all gone. But I say all that to say, like, women's college basketball, Oregon was selling out their games, and not just Oregon, like South Carolina selling out their games. UConn I lived in Connecticut when Breanna Stewart was at UConn, and like people were coming from other states selling out the games, and so it can't be slept on that women's college basketball is also driving a lot of revenue for these schools too, and so really it has to be looked at holistically, I think.
And whether it's the women players or it's the guys who are on the team who aren't going to go on and be in the NBA or play overseas, but are still asked to do 2 practices a day, asked to travel with the team, asked to do all those commitments that take up a huge chunk of their of the time they could be using for studying or socializing or whatever. But, they are investing heavily in this team too. And it's not about them getting to the next level. They might end up being a lawyer. They might end up doing anything else. But they should also share in that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we've decided that. Great.
Now we can hand it down. NCAA, I hope you're listening.
Solved. Done and done.
Well, Hanif, thank you so much for joining us. That was a lot of fun, and we've definitely never talked about the Timberwolves that much and for so long.
I'm glad I will say this, and this is just as a note to all other basketball podcasts. The Timberwolves are vastly underrepresented. Like I'm a listener to this podcast. I listen to a lot of basketball pods. Timberwolves are wildly underrepresented on most of them, and so it was a joy to get to lead the change I want to see in the world.
Oh, lupine representation. You'll love to see it.
Top 5 jersey of all time, right? Like, come on.
Absolutely. I appreciate y'all. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Cookies.
Talk to you soon. Cookies.